and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Pakistan and India have agreed on strict observance of all agreements, understandings and ceasefiring along the line of control and all other sectors. In a meeting, Director Generals of military operations of both countries also agreed to address core issues which might disturb peace. Pakistan military's media wing says the two sides discussed established mechanism of hotline contact. Pakistan says a third state is supporting cross-border terrorist attacks from the territory of the neighboring country. Speaking at United Nations Security Council area formula, Pakistan's ambassador Munir Akram said Islamabad respects the sovereignty of its neighboring states while maintaining its right to self-defense against the state sponsoring terrorism. At least 41 migrants have drowned in the central Mediterranean Sea after their boat capsized. In a joint statement, the UN's Human Rights and Migrants Agency said the dinghy had 120 people on board. This said the shipwreck demonstrates the urgent need to strengthen Europe's search and rescue system. The United States says its patience with Iran on returning to discussions over the 2015 nuclear deal is not unlimited. At a news briefing, State Department spokesman Ned Price said Iran's moves away from compliance with the deal made the issue an urgent challenge for Washington. Iran has not formally responded to a U.S. offer for a joint meeting with the signatories last week. Researchers in the United States have found a new coronavirus variant in New York City. The U.S. toll has jumped to over 505,000 with more than 28.3 million infections. Meanwhile, France has reported over 31,000 new cases, the biggest daily increase since mid-November. In Pakistan, over 1,300 people contracted the virus, while 64 died overnight, bringing the total to 12,762. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.5 million lives and infected over 112 million people. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. Pakistan and India have agreed on strict observance of all agreements, understandings and ceasefiring along the line of control and all other sectors. In a meeting, Director Generals of military operations of both countries also agreed to address core issues which might disturb peace. Pakistan military's media wing says the two sides discussed established mechanism of hotline contact. It said the military officials from both countries reviewed situation along the line of control and all other sectors in a free, frank and cordial atmosphere. The ISPR said the observance will effect from midnight. Both sides reiterated that existing mechanisms of hotline contact and border flag meetings will be utilized to resolve any unforeseen situation or misunderstanding. Pakistan says a third state is sponsoring cross-border attacks from the territory of a neighboring country. Ambassador Munir Akram was speaking at the United Nations Security Council's area formula meeting. Akram said Islamabad respects the sovereignty of its neighboring states but has the right to defend itself against state-sponsored terrorism. He said the fight against terror has been utilized to justify the use of force and foreign intervention. Akram further said India's illegal military occupation of Kashmir was among the worst violations of the UN Charter. The envoy said that the Kashmiri struggle for the right to self-determination cannot be equated with terrorism. He said India was threatening to use force against Pakistan to divert attention from state-sponsored terrorism in occupied Kashmir. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has urged the United Nations to upscale its efforts for a just settlement of the Kashmir issue. Secretary General of the bloc, Yusuf al-Uthaymin, addressed the 46th session of the UN Human Rights Council. He said the situation in the occupied valley has worsened considerably. Al-Uthaymin said the OIC is monitoring the situation on the ground in the occupied valley. He called upon the international community to help Kashmiris achieve their right to self-determination as per UN resolutions. The Secretary General also slammed Israel for its massive human rights violations against the Palestinian people. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pakistan and India have agreed on strict observance of all agreements, understandings and ceasefire along the line of control and all other sectors. In a meeting, Director Generals of military operations of both countries also agreed to address core issues which might disturb peace. For more on this, we are joined by Lieutenant General Naeem Lodhi from Islamabad. Sir, Pakistan and India have agreed on strict observance of all agreements, understandings and ceasefire along the line of control and all other sectors. How do you see this development?
I think it's a significant breakthrough because two nuclear powers having a standoff for such a long time was not a good omen, not for this region, not for the world. So I think whichever side has taken the initiative, they have done a great thing. And especially once they have agreed to talk on the core issues, the only thing is, of course, the high-level interaction will only be possible if it goes right up to political level, which I think this contact will make a base for further talks as far as military-to-military talks are concerned, as far as government-to-government talks are concerned, and especially if they have also mentioned talking on the core issues, that is a great news. And for the time being, I would say that it is also a very good omen for all the civilians living along the line of control, because if you stop all these ceasefire violations, life will be much easier for them. So all said and done, I think it's a very good initiative, and we should keep our fingers crossed and let us hope and wait that more good things happen as far as these two neighbors are concerned.
Sir, will this development help thaw in ties between both the countries?
I think, for a very long time there was no talk going on. The communication was blocked. The governments were not talking. The militaries were not talking. The people were not allowed to really talk to each other. So once this thaw has taken place, it should be taken as a base for people-to-people contact, for government-to-government contact, for military-to-military contact. And I think this will go a long way in creating an environment in this region whereby we can talk to each other and resolve our issues. Because I always say that we are quite good in intellect as far as people of this region are concerned. And I don't believe that if we sit down, we will not be able to resolve our issues. We can always do that. The only precondition is that the mistrust must be removed. The finger pointing at each other must not happen. And the talk must start. Because once we start talking, then the doors keep on opening for further progress. That is what we expect. Yeah.
Sir Naeem Lodhi, thank you for talking to Indus News. And now, moving on, India plans to oblige social media companies to erase contentious content and assist investigations amid a dispute with Twitter. New Delhi had requested Twitter to remove content over farmers' protests, which the social media firm did not entertain. The move fueled the zeal of the government to tighten regulation for content it deems disinformation. The latest draft rules say companies must remove content within 36 hours after a government or legal order. The United States says its patience with Iran on returning to discussions over the 2015 nuclear deal is not unlimited. At a news briefing, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Tehran's moves away from compliance with the deal made the issue an urgent challenge for Washington. Price said the most effective way to ensure Iran could never acquire a nuclear weapon is through diplomacy. Iran has not formally responded to a U.S. offer for a joint meeting with the signatories last week. In Myanmar's city of Yangon, clashes have broken out between supporters and opponents of the military coup as authorities prevented students from the march. There have been about 3 weeks of daily protests and strikes, and students pledged to come out again. But police blocked the gates of the campus, stopping hundreds of students inside from coming out to march. At the same time, thousands of supporters of the military gathered for a rally in central Yangon. Media workers said the supporters threatened their photographers, while one of them was slightly hurt. Doctors are also said to hold a protest today as part of a so-called white coat revolution. Meanwhile, Facebook has banned the Myanmar military from using it and its Instagram platform with immediate effect. At least 41 migrants have drowned in the central Mediterranean Sea after their boat capsized. In a joint statement, the UN's Human Rights and Migrants Agency said the JNJ had 120 people on board. This said missing migrants also include 3 children and 4 women. The agency said the shipwreck demonstrates the urgent need to strengthen Europe's search and rescue system. The statement read, "Saving the lives of migrants in distress must become a priority for the international community." It added some 160 persons have died in the central Mediterranean so far this year. Since 2014, more than 20,000 refugees have died at sea while trying to reach Europe from Africa. The researchers in the United States have found a new coronavirus variant in New York City. The U.S. total has jumped to over 505,000, with more than 28.3 million infections. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.5 million lives and infected over 112 million people. Details in the following report.
Although the US and most South American states saw a 30% decline in new cases and deaths in the last week, infections could spike again due to new variants. Pan American Health Organization says vaccines are in short supply and it will be months before inoculations affect the rate of cases. The researchers say the new virus variant is spreading rapidly in New York City and it carries a mutation that may weaken the effectiveness of vaccines. Moderna says it is working with U.S. government scientists to study an experimental booster shot that targets a concerning new variant. Meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson's one-shot vaccine also appeared safe and effective in trials, paving the way for its approval for emergency use.
I think this news from the Food and Drug Administration is very encouraging. We know that we need to get more people vaccinated, especially when there's a variant around. Because remember, viruses can't mutate if they can't survive. So the more people we get vaccinated, the better. And to have another vaccine available, and I expect it'll be authorized this weekend, is really going to help in terms of getting as many people vaccinated in as short as time as possible. So it's very good news.
In Europe, France reported over 31,000 new cases, the biggest daily increase since mid-November. Paris has also announced a weekend lockdown in the Dunkirk area while keeping other areas under watch in a ray of light amid grim news. A study in UK showed strong antibody responses in people who have received 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine. The European Union's vaccine rollout continues to stutter due to delivery delays, limiting the bloc to only a fraction of its planned inoculations. Meanwhile, unlike its previous approach, the Swedish government announced to step up its restrictions in a bid to avoid third wave.
The situation in Sweden is serious. We have a high spread of infection and it is continuing to increase. The mutations mean that this situation is even more worrying. There is a big risk of a third wave. This is not predetermined, but it is your and our collective behavior that determines whether that will be the case.
South Korea distributed the AstraZeneca vaccines to hospitals and public health centers across the country as it kicks off its mass inoculation drive.
Pakistan has reported 64 deaths from COVID-19 overnight. The health ministry says the fatality toll has risen to 12,772. It said 1,361 more people contracted the virus in the last 24 hours. Out of nearly 576,000 infected in the country, nearly 540,000 have recovered. However, there is still more than 23,000 active cases in Pakistan. The ministry said just over 2,000 patients are admitted to hospitals across the country. Venezuela has instructed EU's delegation head in Caracas to leave the country in 72 hours. This comes after the EU imposed new curbs on 19 Venezuelan officials this week for allegedly undermining democracy. Venezuela's Foreign Minister George Ariaza said Caracas has declared Isabel Brilhant persona non grata. In a press briefing, Ariaza termed the sanctions against Venezuelans truly unacceptable. Reacting, the EU said Venezuela's decision to expel the envoy will further isolate the South American nation. The bloc called on the Venezuelan government to reconsider the move. In Ecuador, the death toll from riots between rival gangs in 4 prisons had risen to 79, while Ecuador's National Police head says a new mutiny in Guayaquil's prison is underway. In a tweet, the official said police are preparing to enter again with necessary rational force. Confirming the new riots, the prison authority said its agents are coordinating with Ecuador's National Police. Yesterday, the riots broke out in prisons in Guayaquil, Cuenca, and Latacunga cities simultaneously. Earlier, the government said the order was restored while some police officers were also wounded during the riots. President Lenin Moreno has declared a temporary state of emergency in prisons across the Andean country. President Joe Biden has revoked its predecessor's order that blocked many green card applicants from entering the U.S. Donald Trump had issued the ban last year, saying it was needed to protect U.S. workers amid high unemployment. In a statement, the White House said Biden overturned the measure through an executive order. It said the ban does not advance interests of the U.S. The statement read, this Trump order also prevented people from joining their families in the U.S. However, Biden has left in place another ban on most foreign temporary workers. Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernando says U.S. allegations of his ties with cartels could affect cooperation in fighting drug trafficking. This comes after U.S. prosecutors accuse Hernandez of protecting traffickers in order to assert his power in the country. They accused him of accepting a $1 million bribe from Mexican drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. But the Honduran president, who is a key U.S. ally in Central America, has denied the allegations. Hernandez said the Los Guerreros cartel falsely accused him in an effort to seek shorter prison sentences. Addressing the Honduran Congress, he warned U.S. officials that allegations could comprise joint security efforts.
If certain offices in the United States make the mistake of rewarding drug traffickers who give false testimony instead of increasing their penalties, if that error happens, then the battle that we have jointly waged with our allies against drug trafficking may become unsustainable.
Earlier, Democratic senators introduced legislation to impose sanctions on Hernandez for corruption and human rights abuses. And now, moving on, the Australian Parliament has passed the final amendments to a media law that forces tech giants to pay for news content. Tweaks to the law were made after Facebook blocked access to Australian news outlets on its pages. The law incentivizes tech giants and news organizations to negotiate payment deals. In a joint statement, Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and Communications Minister Paul Fletcher said the code will ensure that news businesses are fully remunerated for the content they generate. They added it will also help sustain public interest journalism in Australia. Australia is the first country where a government arbitrator will decide the price to be paid by tech giants if talks fail. Whale watchers in the U.S. state of California got up close and personal with a huge humpback whale. It was filmed on camera mugging boats off the coast of Newport Beach. Mugging refers to when a whale swims close to a boat and stays close while interacting with those on the board. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says humpback whales can grow up to 60 feet and 40 tons. They can live about 80 to 90 years. Despite their huge size, humpback whales are considered as one of the gentlest animals in the world. Pakistan is home to nearly 3 million Afghan refugees who have built their homes and businesses in the country over the past few decades. Though thousands have been repatriated back to Afghanistan, Pakistan continues to host a sizable refugee population. This report by our correspondent Manila Ahmed has more.
The story of refugees is one of resilience, perseverance, and courage. One such story involves Salim Hashimi, who came to Pakistan as a refugee during the Soviet-Afghan War. Hailing from the city of Jalrez in Maidan Wardak province, Hashimi opened his own restaurant 2 years ago in Islamabad.
People visit Islamabad from all over the world. Due to the diversity of the city, I knew that people would be accepting to different flavors in cuisine.
Muhammad Ahmed is another Afghan refugee who is a proud owner of a French fries cart in the capital's Jinnah supermarket. Originally from Mazar Sharif, Amir considers Pakistan his home and says the country has given him multiple opportunities.
I was born and raised in Pakistan as a second-generation refugee. The government of Pakistan has granted us with all sorts of facilities.
Despite the huge financial challenges, Pakistan has given its guests access to health and education services. As the prospect of peace in Afghanistan improves, the focus could indeed turn to how to bring about the orderly return of refugees after years of insecurity. Manahil Ahmed, Indus News, Islamabad.
In Colombia, a man's search for his missing brother ends in joy after 32 years of separation. More about their rare reunion in this report.
3-year-old Jonathan was playing with his brother Alfonso in their garden in western Bogota on 25th of September 1987 when a family friend approached, inviting him to buy candy. Jonathan went with the man, vanishing without a trace for 32 years. Older brother Juan Jimenez, then 5, was looking out the window when the man took his brother. Jimenez grew up with his mother and has grief over her son's disappearance. Juan vowed to find his brother.
I guess it was a promise. I grew up showing mommy suffering so much, so I always wanted to give her like happiness, to do something for her, like to see your mom suffering in such a way. I guess that was my big desire, to try to do something, and in this situation, to find my brother, to be able to find my brother.
Then a DNA company called MyHeritage donated a test in the hope he could match with Jonathan that way. It worked. In 2019, Juan got a message from a 34-year-old lawyer in Norway who said he had been adopted at age 4 and was trying to find his biological family. Juan went to Norway in January 2020 to meet Jonathan, now John.
It was hard for me going through all my childhood not knowing about my biological family. But now we are together and we have to live in the present, you know, because we can't do anything about the past. We can do something about the future, and now we are creating a future. We can never get back the 32 years that we missed, but we can make the next 32 the most amazing ones in our lives.
Trapped in Colombia by a coronavirus lockdown on a visit last year, Jonathan studied Spanish and celebrated 32 birthdays without his family.
Iconic cartoon characters Tom and Jerry are returning to screens, but this time they are entering the real world. In the new movie, the pair take their competitive antics to a posh hotel in New York. More in this report.
Tom and Jerry were created back in 1940. The cartoons have had continued success over 8 decades, seemingly never putting a foot or paw wrong with audiences. Their comedic, slapstick violence returns at the scene of the biggest celebrity wedding of the decade. In the film,
It really does harken back to the Tom and Jerry that we love. It's 2D animation with little elements of 3D, but it's predominantly 2D animation, which I think, as a fan, was a really big deal for me. And then as well as that, they don't shy away from them bonking each other on the head and dropping the weights on each other and really going at each other.
Comedian Colin Jost plays one half of the celebrity couple in the movie. He feels the time is right for the warring couple to return to our screens during a pandemic.
It's such a pure, goofy comedy right now. To see that kind of physical comedy, especially from cartoon characters, that I think it's a huge relief right now. I mean, to have the fact that they don't talk and they just take out all their feelings with violence, I think is very refreshing to see right now, and people can let out a lot of their frustrations through these characters.
Stocks in the Asia-Pacific are recovering from yesterday's fall. Bursaries have risen after the Dow Jones Industrial Average surged to a record closing high overnight. Seoul's Kospi is leading the gains, jumping 3.5%. Japan's Nikkei 225 has added over 1.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has also ascended close to 2%. The ASX 200 in Australia has also added over 0.5%. Mainland Chinese bourses too edged up over 0.5%, while the ASX 200 on Australia gained almost 1%. And in the Pakistan Super League, Islamabad United beat Karachi Kings by 5 wickets at the National Stadium in Karachi. Sharjeel Khan's century went in vain as United chased down a 197-run target in the final over. Khan and Babar Azam put in a 150-run partnership to help Kings post a big total. In reply, United's Alex Hales, Iftikhar Ahmed and Hussain Talat played blistering innings to help their side win the match. Alex Hales was declared player of the match for scoring 46 of 21 deliveries. Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.